Okay, so we're just going to get started with the big story on the economic front. Welcome everyone to Business Morning, Tuesday, the 17th of September. I am Bosin Amofai. Of course, Nigeria's inflation coming through from the statistics office about 8:30 this morning. Headline inflation beating some of the forecasts down to 11.02% from 11.08% previous year-on-year. On a month-on-month basis, inflation went down to just below 1%, 0.99% against 1.01% in the previous month. If you look at the food index on a year-on-year basis, it was down 13.17%. On a month-on-month basis, it was also down to 1.22%. If you look at the core sub-index inflation, that was also down 8.68% reading on a year-on-year basis, that over 8.80% previous. On a month-on-month basis, core sub-index also down from 0.77% in the month of July to 0.67% in the month of August. Look at the urban index. Urban index rose to 11.48% from 11.43% on a month-on-month basis. That was down to 1.04% from 1.07%. And the rural index, measured by the statistics office, reading 10.61% year-on-year from 10.64%. And on a month-on-month basis, a little bit lower to 0.93% from 0.96% to 0.93%, just about 0.3% difference. If you look across the state-by-state profile, which the MBS also published today, these three states with the highest inflation reading on a year-on-year basis were Kebbi State, 14.97%, Kano State, 13.24%, and in the third place, you have Bauchi State with 13%. On the slowest rise in inflation, on a year-on-year basis, Cross River came first, 8.97%. Delta has the second lowest inflation reading from the month we just finished year-on-year, 8.63%, and the third, Kwara State, 8.32%. Okay, that's the economic data we just got. All of this will be part of the conversation today, all to the end of next week, of this week, and of course, as we get to next week, Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the Central Bank. So we get to the big story. President Buhari has unveiled a special economic squad hitting the country's economic bulletin, setting up a new economic advisory council of 8 economists and technocrats, which will be reporting directly to him. In the same vein, Mr. President scraps the existing economic management team headed by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. So, who are members of the President Buhari's SEALs, what they call the Sea, Air, Land, and the air, whatever you call it. It's called the SEALs, if you know what the SEALs stands for. That's their team that's trained to fight in the air, on the ground, and on the water. Professor Salami is the chairman. He's an economist, a senior fellow, an associate professor at the Lagos Business School, and a member of the economic management team under the late President Yar'Adua, and a member of the IMF Sub-Saharan Africa Advisory Group. He's also a member of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Dr. Mohammad Segaki is also on the list. Is has PhD economics from the University of Warwick in England. His thesis was on commercial policy and industrialization in Nigeria. He's also a political economist and government relations advisor on skills and entrepreneurship in northern Nigeria. The third member of the team, Professor Odiojowu, economics professor, former chief executive of the National Planning Commission and chief economic advisor under President Obasanjo in 2004 to 2005. Dr. Shehu Yahaya was the chairman of the Development Bank of Nigeria, an executive director of the EFDB, and a member of the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee. Was formerly a group manager, GMD at Nexim. He's a general manager at Nexim, that's Nigeria Export-Import Bank, and a macroeconomic lecturer at the University of Sussex. He was the head of economics at the Bayero University in Kano. The fourth member, Dr. Iyabo Masha, a global economist, worked with the IMF since 2003, worked at the research department of the Central Bank in 1998, at the World Bank in 1997, in 1998, and immediate past IMF country representative in Sierra Leone. The fifth member, Professor Chukwuma Soludo, of course, economics professor and central bank governor between 2004 and 2009, had postdoctoral training at the Brookings Institution, University of Cambridge, postdoctoral fellow at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. And bringing in Mr. Bismarck Rwani, also a member of the team, an economist and a global investment advisor, chief executive officer at Financial Derivatives Company, a banker, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, and a chartered member of the Institute of Bankers of England and Wales. And finally, Dr. Mohammad Segaki, who is the secretary of the team, he has PhD in economics from Lancaster University in the UK, and he did a thesis on oil exports and the Nigerian economy, an econometric study. So what's the job description for this economic team? One, their job is to advise Mr. President on economic policy matters, fiscal analysis, economic growth, and range of internal and global economic issues. They will work with relevant cabinet ministers and heads of monetary and fiscal agencies during their tenure and have monthly technical sessions and scheduled quarterly meetings with Mr. President. The chairman of the team may, however, request unscheduled meetings if the need arises. President Buhari is expected to formally inaugurate Doyin Salami's Economic Advisory Council team after he is done with the United Nations General Assembly meeting later this month. So expect Doyin Salami's team to be inaugurated towards the end of the month. That's according to sources close to the team. So let's get the conversation started with Bajide Ogunsowo, who is a data and policy analyst, is live in the studios to take a look at this new team and what we expect from them. Of course, the social media has been agog since yesterday evening on, well, some folks are congratulating members of the team. There are those who believe that this is a round peg in a round hole. Some believe, some says, will Mr. President listen to the team? You have diverse views overnight on this, even as we speak. Babajide, good morning. Let's get this show started. And yes, this is looks like a breakfast for just two of us, but not enough, I'm not sure, to go around those 8 members of the team.
Maybe not enough, but there are 3 things we need to focus on this morning, Boston. The first is, what have these 8 members been brought in to do? The second is, can they do it? And the final thing we should look at is, how will they do it? Now, if we look at that press release, there were 5 things that they will focus on. The first is economic growth. The second is economic policy. The third, physical analysis. The fourth, domestic issues. And finally, the fifth, global issues. Those are the 5 things that our release said they will focus on. However, Bolson.
Key job descriptions, just a quick one there. Let's start with the chief himself, that Mr. President. Why did you think he's bringing these 8 members in to form what you call an economic kitchen cabinet?
One reason, and that is this. We need to put bread on the table of many Nigerian families. That's the reason.
It's about this. I'm supported by a cup of tea.
That's additional. That is a luxury for many families. A lot of families. The evidence shows approximately half of Nigerian families do not have this. So all of that 5 things I talked about.
Also, families want a bigger size.
A bigger size. So all those 5 descriptions, all those economic jargons, economic analysis, fiscal analysis.
It's all about this.
It's all about this. In summary, what I expected that press release should talk about is all this top quality 8 members should be able to put more bread, affordable bread, on the table of Nigerian families. That's what Nigerians are really concerned about.
And healthy bread, for that matter.
Yes.
Well buttered, what is it? Here, butter bread these days. I'm not sure there's butter inside, but it's just a butter bread. But we need a healthy bread, locally made. But when we talk about the ingredient as well, this all go back to agriculture, isn't it?
It also
the wheat is still imported. I think some of the ingredients.
A lot of the ingredients salt, are imported. So that now brings us to, how will they achieve growth? You know, if I've been trying to put up a list of all the presidents in the world, and as it stands, President Muhammad Buhari will perhaps be among the top 10 most advised presidents in the world, Bosun.
How would you say so?
So already in the Constitution, section 153, subsection 1H, talks about the National Economic Council, and it mandates 38 members, all the state governors, the vice president, and the chairman, the central bank governor. So constitutionally, the National Economic Council still exists, providing advice to the president. That's their responsibility. Now we also have this new 8 members, the Economic Advisory Council.
The National Economic Council, largely, perhaps with the exception of Godwin Emefiele, is largely made of political folks. 36 state governors are all there for political reasons. So,
But constitutionally,
But
their
constitutionally,
role
they're
is to
there.
advise the
Advice
president.
the
So what we
president.
see is the president will have a lot of... The National Security Council advises the president.
Yes.
As chief of staff, the ministers, the federal executive cabinet also advises the president. So what we have by this new Economic Advisory Council is gone are the days that the president will not have sufficient advice.
So,
the next step is,
perhaps,
which of this advice will the president be taking?
Perhaps, and this is it, perhaps the National Economic Council is your regular army, as you want to put it. The foot soldiers, the guys with the boots on the ground. These 8 members, and the first thing that struck me yesterday with the list, well, there were just 8 of them, which means a very small, a crack team, a squad team, get in the night, Rambo style of doing things, if you like, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Get in the night, throw a few bombs, rescue the hostage, and they're home and dry. Do you think this is the team?
Now let's look at the quality.
Different from the...
Let's look at the quality of these 8 members. While we might not have enough time to look at them one by one, I would like to particularly talk about the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council, Professor Doyin Salami. And over a decade ago, I had the privilege to be tutored by him, to be mentored by him while I was doing my MBA. Professor Doyin Salami is what you could refer to as an economic hitman. He understands how to troubleshoot problems, and he has the capacity to be able to look at the solutions and then advise the president on the solutions. And I also think if you look at the other 7 members of that Economic Advisory Council, they have the capacity and they have the skills to be able to deliver the goods that Nigerians want, and that is to be able to provide more food on their table.
Most of the members of this special squad are what you call economic fire eaters.
But you know,
Doyin Salami, Bismarck Rawane, Soludo when he was the central bank governor, and a few others. So it looks like these are folks. But the key question, which is this: how much internal and external vulnerabilities or risks do you think Nigeria faces? Do you think this is a new president, Mr. President Buhari? Do you think Buhari is reborning or rejigging himself and thinking that, look, he's looking at the bottom of the barrel? 4 years down the line, the economy will be the chief focus on which his administration and his entire second term in office will be judged.
I think he's rejigging. I think he's going now with a more private sector orientation. And we should ask ourselves, why is he bringing in these 8 members? That's the first thing. And the reason is quite clear. In 2015, when President Buhari came in, total capital, total foreign direct investment was 15% of all capital imported into the country, 15%. In 2016, it was 20%. What do I mean? Foreign direct investment, that long-term capital, was 20% of all capital brought into the country as at 2016. In 2019, foreign direct investment is down to 4% of capital.
Of the total inflows.
Of total inflows. So clearly, bringing in and attracting high-quality investments is priority for the president. Does this team, the Economic Advisory Team, have the potential to achieve it? Based on their experience, yes, they do. And that is an advantage for the president. However, there's one disadvantage to this Economic Advisory Council.
And what would that be?
None of them are billionaires. In other words, they are highly experienced when it comes to advising and the theoretical. But will they now be able to convert their years, their rich years of theoretical experience into practical experience that will make Nigerians
So the key issue
wealthy?
is, what exactly do investors, mostly foreign direct investors, what do they really want to see and what do they really want to hear? Let's ask Johnson Chukwu, who is the CEO at Carry Asset Management. He's joining this conversation via Skype from downtown Lagos. So Johnson Chukwu, good morning. Welcome to the conversation.
Good morning, Bosin. Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you're listening in. So the key question is, what do you think the global investors would want to hear? What would they like to see? Do you think these 8 members have what it takes to bring this so much needed confidence, to bring in the much needed money?
Okay, Bosin, the way I would see is that the 8-member team have what it takes to advise the president on the right economic policy. And remember, their role is Economic Advisory Council. Their role is basically to advise the president on economic policy. So I believe they have the competence, they have the experience, they have the the knowledge to advise the president on economic policy. Well, how that advice will translate into economic execution of those policies is a different thing entirely. But whether they have the experience, whether based on their background, based on their orientation, I'm also quite impressed with the orientation of the members. Most of them are private sector driven economists. They are people who believe the private sector should be at the driving seat of growing the economy. So there will always be a consensus among them on the kind of policy that the government should implement to see a faster growth of the economy. But how that advice will translate into action will be the challenge, because interestingly, if you look at that composition, I would have expected that the president will also bring in some of the key economic ministers to be part of that economic advisory council, so that whatever is the decision of that committee or that advisory council will have a channel of implementation. But unfortunately, I didn't see that.
Johnson, a quick one. Part of the job description or terms of reference, as it were, for the committee, for this advisory council is that they will work with relevant cabinet ministers and heads of monetary and fiscal agencies. So perhaps some of their meetings will have Godwin Emefiele, the head of the central bank, sitting with them, perhaps the managing director of the NNPC, sitting in there, the chairman of the FRSC, sitting in there, perhaps the Comptroller General of Customs, sitting in there, the managing director of the Nigerian Port Authority, sitting in those meetings. So it says they will work with relevant cabinet ministers and heads of monetary and fiscal agencies. So it looks like, yes, these folks are 8 in number, but they will work with the relevant Muslim key members, Fashola, for example, in Works and Housing, new Power Minister, and the rest of them. So is that sufficient confidence for you?
Yeah, for me, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. They will seek for input or from some of those critical ministries. It's a different thing from those ministers being part of the advisory council and being duty-bound to implement decisions taken by a committee for which they are members of. If you seek for input from the Minister of Finance and she's not disposed or not available at that point, she's not bound to implement your recommendations. If they are members of that committee, I would think that they will be binded by the decisions that they are part of making. I think it should have been stronger if they are co-opted. A few of them will be relevant in being part of that committee. And I'll tell you why. The reality is that you cannot, like Abiola would say, shave the post head in their absence. You want the ministers to implement the recommendations of the council. Remember that the council reporting directly to the president, and the ministers are reporting to the chief of staff. So the issue that where is the convergence that we are supposed to have that will ensure uniformity or unity of command? That, for me, is where the challenge is. But whether the committee has the capacity to advise, I think they have the capacity to advise.
Mr. Johnson, very, very quickly, do you think that this development, as it stands today, overnight when this came in, do you think this is a trading team? Do you think the market will be positive on this? Do you think investment community will like this establishment of a new Economic Advisory Council?
Yeah, the answer is a straight yes, and I have to quantify that yes. One, in the first place, a move in the right direction. We've not had a very strong private sector-oriented economic advisory team for the past 4 years. Now we have one. The only thing we will now push for is that there should be a channel of integration of the policies of that committee with those who have the power to execute. But whether the market will feel excited, yes, they should feel excited. Because we now have a group that will advise the president on broad macroeconomic issues, and the members of that committee are largely private sector-oriented economic people.
Johnson, just a second. Hold it there. Hold your thought. We're going to take a break. What happened while you were speaking was that the bread that was here on the table when we started the show about 20 minutes ago has been replaced with something else. Perhaps you'll have a share in this. I'm not sure that bread was big enough for 3 of us to share. It's been replaced with something else. We'll show you what that is. After the break, everyone stand by. You may just get a pie of that if you're lucky. Welcome back to the show. So, Babajide Ogunsawo believes that that bread will not be enough for 200 odd millions of Nigerians, and believes that the Salami's team, which is President Buhari's special economic squad, should bake something, help President Buhari bake something bigger and can go around everyone. Perhaps a little bit more sweeter, depending on whether you're watching your weight otherwise. So this was what we've replaced it with. And that is this round pizza. It's an onion, I say, kind of onion rings on it. Babajide.
Yes, it is, but let me make myself very clear, Bolson. The Economic Advisory Council will advise the president, but who will advise the Economic Advisory Council? And I think we should. We should be the ones to advise, and the stakeholders, the
various interest groups,
should be the ones to advise the
groups, yes.
Economic Advisory Council. And here's what I mean. Today we have two types of Nigerians. The first is we have Nigerians who do not have bread on their table, which we talked about in the first segment, 94 million Nigerians. So that's the first sort of advice the economic policy led by the Economic Advisory Council.
Don't you think the economic realities on ground, as of today, are enough advice for everyone? By the way, this is not an imported pizza. We didn't make phone calls to whatever to get it. This is made in Nigeria, just in case anyone. Johnson Chukwu, are you still there from Carry Asset Management?
Yes, I am, Bosin.
I'm sure you can see this.
Absolutely, I can see it.
Yeah. This is made in Nigeria, 100% Nigeria indigenous. Thank you. We just want to clear that with everyone. Babajide will decide how to get a share of this. So, how do you think this team, as he's saying, would need to advise the advisory team, who guards the guardian, custodian, custode? What do you think here, Johnson, moving forward? This is the fate of nearly 200 million Nigerians in the hands of Mr. President and this new 8-member team.
Well, let's start from the background of the 8-member team. Like I said earlier, their policy orientation is very clear. Most of them are private sector-driven economic thinkers. So, and they have reasonable level of interface with the society. I mean, Salami is a lecturer in Lagos Business School, an economic advisor in the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank. Look at people like Chukwuma Soludo or Bismarck Rewani. These are people who have strong exposure to the economy. And the basic thing that is left, like I mentioned earlier, is their role is advisory. They are members of the advisory council. They advise the president on what they think should be the economic policy of the government. The president will now have to translate that into economic policy. The best they can do is to recommend what they believe the government should do. Somebody has to do that. So when that recommendation is passed on to the president will now take it and call the minister and say, okay, you need to go and implement this. I do not think ministers will be happy when policies are formulated and handed down to them. And that's why I said there should be some level of handshake, integration between the advisor's role and the executor's role. And I expected that probably it's not late. The president can still co-opt some 2 or 3 ministers into that economic advisory council. So okay, they are part of that decision-making process.
Yes. Thank you, Johnson. Babajide, and talking about co-opting more people, I'm sure Mr. President must have thought very deeply about this, and I'm not sure it's something that just came what you call something, you just had a brainwave. I'm sure you must have thought through this, that look, we have the economic management team, which is now being dissolved, but we still have the bigger National Economic Council. So Mr. Vice President is still very busy and he has a team to work with. But of course, the president needs a smaller team. So do you think that perhaps he must have thought about why don't you have ministers as members of this team? Do you think Mr. President is perhaps thinking there will be the usual problem of bringing the establishment into this rather than folks from the outside who will be able to tell him pure and simple the word on the street, how you and I feel on the street, rather than those who have political official who receive salaries from the government who say, well, Mr. President, this we think otherwise.
So let's go into the mind of the president. I talked about 2 things.
I like that. I want to understand, Mr. President.
Let's go into the mind. The first is the president wants to put bread on the table of Nigerians, which we've talked about. The second is for those that have bread, he wants to convert their bread to pizza. In other words, Nigerians need to...
Something a bit more luxurious.
Higher standard of living.
And higher standard
and
of
there are
living.
21 million Nigerians today that are unemployed and underemployed. Those are the ones that need their bread to be converted to pizza.
Even for those who are hardworking Nigerians earning salaries.
Oh, yes. But let's also consider this carefully. Today, if we were to have an economic World Cup, which countries in Africa will play for Africa in the economic World Cup? And based on GDP growth, today, is Nigeria among the top 3 countries in Africa? No. Are we among the top 7? No, we are not. Are we among the top 10? No, we are not. If we were to have an economic World Cup, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire will be our top strikers. Rwanda and Ethiopia will play midfield for Africa. Kenya
and,
Libya
and Botswana.
And will play the defense. So, in other words, an economic World Cup, Nigeria will be missing. Indeed, based on
We'll likely
the evidence,
be sitting on the bench.
we will not even be on the bench. And so...
in the dressing room.
We will be in the
Most
dressing room.
likely, watching through television.
So the plan of, and what we look at, trying to dissect and read the mind of the president is there's a need for Nigeria to now have its representative in Africa's economic World Cup. And how will we achieve that? Private sector. Today we talk about GDP, but the evidence, Boston, shows that 60% of what we refer as GDP in Nigeria today is private sector expenditure. In other words, families like you and I and those that are watching us account for more than half of Nigeria's GDP, the private sector. So the solution to Nigeria's economic problems doesn't lie with the government.
Well,
it lies with the private sector.
Some folks of our viewers believe that your initial comment about the fact that there are no billionaires amongst them, Fabio Tedola and the rest of them, Dangote and the rest, but Mr. Yusuf Dirisi says he believes that these individuals must have advised successful billionaires. Perhaps they have advised Aliko, Rabiu, the rest of them, Dantata and Co.
Oh, yes, they
before.
have.
Most likely,
yes,
they advisors.
Oh, they have. And that's why we say they are experienced on the theoretical, and they've also achieved goals.
Some of them know
advice.
they know where the money is. You won't be Dr. doing Salami or Bismarck Rawani if you don't know where the money is.
Without doubt, they do know where the money is, but they now need to get that money into the hands of Nigerians. They need to put bread on the table of Nigerians through their advice, and those Nigerians that have bread, they need to ensure that their bread is converted to pizza, and that's a higher
or perhaps
standard
bread
of living.
bread for breakfast, a pizza for lunch.
Whatever it is, the advice. The
And
president
I don't
now
mind
needs.
having the two because folks are on social media and they are thinking of how we're going to share this at the end of the show. I think we have a
more than
big
half of
problem on our hands
Nigerians
here.
still can't afford a pizza. Boss.
A very quick one. Just to wrap this up as we tee off this conversation. The CEO at Kauri Asset Management, Johnson Chukwu. Your final word here, the inauguration of the team will be towards the end of the month. That's what sources close to this story, it tells us. So on the inauguration day and what have you, how do you think this team should hit the ground running?
Well, I think the first thing they need to do is to formulate a broad economic guide that the president should run with, which will set new targets for GDP growth rates and how to stimulate the economy. They should identify the sectors of the economy that require immediate stimulus, and they should advise the president on how to stimulate the economy. They will define those parameters that the government can actually afford to control and the ones they should allow the market to control. A situation where the government in the past had tried to be the driver of economic activities had not worked. So I think the committee members or the advisory council members have their job well cut out. And they know their honor. And I believe on the one, they will know what to tell the president.
Okay. Babaji, thank you so much, Johnson Chukwu. We appreciate your time and being part of the conversation. Keep an eye on the market, on this story for us, and see how it goes today on both the equities and the debt side of the market. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Babaji, let's wrap it up. How do you think they should hit the ground running? Because we have a number of folks who say, well, this is a good one by Mr. President, putting this special crack team in place. But your word as to how do you think the future of Nigerian economy beyond 2023? Because I'm sure that whatever these folks will do, this 8-member team squad will do, will have implications beyond President Buhari's next 4 years, his final term in office.
So here's what we should advise them. Nigeria today has 46 economic sectors, Bosun, but only 4 sectors account for 50% of the size of the economy. I'm talking about crop production, trade, the telecommunication sector, and crude oil. So the advice that we need, and the president needs more than ever before, is how do we ensure that other sectors pull up
40-something.
for the
How do
six
we
sectors.
stimulate those
For the
40
six
days?
sectors, only 4 account for 50% of the GDP. So we need 40 plus more sectors to be able to contribute significantly to job creation. Oh yes, there are only 14 quarters left for President Buhari.
Do you think President Buhari will change some of his perhaps his mindset about privatization, perhaps sale of some assets, perhaps break down NNPC, privatize part of it, perhaps the PPMC or whatever part of it, the NPDC? Do you think this team will be able to convince him on these very critical, not so sexy fiscal policies and actions he needs to take to find those investment monies coming in?
I don't know exactly what the president will do, but there are 3 things that this team must do for Nigeria, and that is advise the president about the past, advise him about today's Nigeria, and then to be able to advise him about the future of Nigeria.
Yeah, in particular, they will remind him about his a promise that, yes, he will lay the foundation to take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty, 10 years each over the next 10 years. And that 10 years start from now. He will deliver 4 out of it. His successor will deliver 6 out of it. I'm sure that is where...
Two things. Put bread on the table of some Nigerians. The second, convert those that have bread, convert their bread to pizza. And that is a higher standard of living.
Okay, maybe next time you come around, we'll talk about dinner. Maybe by then we'll have some ogbono soup, whatever it is here, for the next conversation, because dinner is also very important, even though they said breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. Maybe that would be a common, something like that, I don't know, whatever, but fura de nono, whatever it is. So we should eat a little bit less food at night. Thank you so much.
The 3 square meals you're having, it's a luxury. That's a luxury for you, boss.
No, this is more than enough for square meals. By the way, we'll decide how to share this off camera, everyone. Thank you so much for being part of the show this morning. That's the conversation around the Economic Advisory Council. Everyone is waiting for the pizza distribution. This is not fact, everyone. We don't have a federal executive council here. We've got to do this in-house. Thank you so much once again. And next time, we want an indigenous meal on the table.
We surely will.
Fully 100%.
100% Nigeria.
Yeah, something. Father rice, Abakaliki rice,
Amala,
Kebi, whatever, something like that. Thank you. Let's make this all better.